The world is full of strange unknowns. Oddities abound. Secrets and cover-ups are everywhere. Ghosts, spirits, cryptids, and all creatures of the night are waiting to give you a fright. Fear not. Through light and fire we will expose them to the light. Welcome to the Dragon's Nest. Here is your host, Will Lindsay.
Hey everybody out there in podcast land, welcome to this edition of the Dragon's Nest podcast. Sitting to my left is my most beautiful companion, Miss Karen. How are you this evening?
I am doing wonderful, Mr. Will. How are you doing?
Oh, you know, just hanging in the house, doing absolutely nothing because we're quarantined, but that's the situation at the moment. But, we're bringing podcasts out to these people so that they have something to listen to other than the depressing news that's on every single day.
Well, hopefully we add a little bit of entertainment, no matter if it's funny or cringy. Hopefully we offer something.
Well, just to get the bad news out in the beginning.
Yeah.
We will no longer be going to Waverly because of the current situation. So that has been postponed, inevitably at this point in time, because they're not doing any tours until, what, August?
Probably close to August, if not even later. So,
and those have already been booked out, correct?
Right, exactly. Those have already been booked. And so, but that's not the end of it. Of course, we're going to keep trying to go because that's our goal. And
so maybe in season 3 we'll get to Waverly.
Maybe. We've been trying for a while, but hopefully next year we'll definitely get to go.
So on our social media sites, I've posted a few articles over the last couple of weeks we'll be covering in the next few episodes. One of them is about messages from purgatory, possibly.
Ooh,
so there's a photo with looks like burnt fingerprints on a book. And so this article by Charlie Hintz is called Fingerprints from Purgatory. The Piccolo Museo del Purgatorio, or
easy for you to say,
Small Purgatory Museum, can be found in the Church of the Sacred Heart of Suffrage in Rome. The original chapel on this site burned in 1897, leaving behind charred ruins, and according to Father Victor Jouet, the clear image of a spectral face left behind on one of the burned walls. Jouet concluded the mark was proof of the state of purgatory, the visage of a deceased soul suffering an expiation as it was being purified for entrance into heaven. With the blessing of Pope Pius X, Jouet traveled throughout Italy, France, Belgium, and Germany, seeking out similar relics. He collected his finds in a room adjacent to the newly rebuilt church. Among them is a bedshirt bearing the burned handprint of its owner's dead mother, and this prayer book marked by the scorched fingerprints of a soul who reached out to his brother from purgatory, asking for prayers to redeem his unholy life.
Ooh.
I wonder why exactly his life was so unholy.
Well, my question is that so there are charred fingerprints on a rag, and they're saying that it's
on a book.
Oh, it's on a book.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not somebody who just went and put some charcoal on their hand and and smudged the pages. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it follows the same line of thinking as the Shroud of Turin. You know, there are people who devoutly believe the Shroud of Turin is the visage of Jesus Christ, and, you know, other people don't, and they have historical reasons for why they believe it can't be.
Right. So
it's all about faith.
Absolutely, and I agree with that.
Baby.
I agree with that completely.
Just touch my body.
Oh no, here he goes. Why do I have to apologize for you?
I don't know. You should just stop apologizing. You should just stop. It is what it is.
Every single podcast.
Speaking of things that are in museums, you got a story about a museum there, it looks like.
I do. The museum staff who frequently witness flying Agatha Christie books believe it's haunted by the crime writer's playful ghost.
If you get hit by the Orient Express, is it like getting hit by a train?
I think it would probably hit you pretty hard. This is by Colleen Smith. So staff and volunteers who work at the, I'm going to say it wrong, Torquay?
You just say it however you want.
Museum are convinced that the playful ghost crime writer Agatha Christie may be behind frequent poltergeist activity in the gift shop. Why only the gift shop?
Why not?
I mean, I would go through the whole museum, but the oldest museum in Devon has long been rumored to be haunted, and previously released CCTV footage showing leaflets mysteriously flying off shelves. Now, staff insist they have witnessed frequent poltergeist activity. They have seen Agatha Christie, has seen Agatha Christie being launched across the room, and wonder if the Queen of Crime is haunting the gift shop, which contains many of her books. The museum holds the UK's only Agatha Christie collection, which relics of her childhood days in Ashfield, a beautiful detached villa in Barton on Barton Road, which was
Can't help how people write.
was demolished in the 1960s, much to the author's distress. Flying books are not the only sign of the ghost at the 175-year-old I always mess this word up. Exhibition space. It's just one of those words, guys.
Like the judicial system.
Which has previously embraced the reputation of Devon's most haunted museum and hosts Night at the Museum style paranormal nights. During one overnight ghost hunt, the image of a young girl was photographed bearing a striking resemblance to the young Agatha. The staff who have seen flying books think the strange phenomena is linked to an enormous ladder in the corner of the same room. It is made from wooden floorboards salvaged from the demolition of Ashfield, which young Agatha used to play on. In the most recent paranormal incident last week, shop manager Francisca Ferrara, I'm not sure how to say that, Ferrara?
Ferrara, I guess. Sounds good to me.
And paranormal Stuart Scott, thank you, Stuart, for having an easy name, both witnessed 2 books flying off different shelves that hit a customer. And when we asked to see the video showing the flying books and to see if it was a hoax, both insisted, no, it's true. It happens all the time. It's spooky. Gift shop manager Francisca says every time books fly off the shelves, it's always Agatha Christie books. It has happened so many times. The most recent was last Tuesday. This poor woman was walking by and one of the Agatha Christie books came flying at her. When she walked over to the other stand, when she walked over to the other stand and the other Agatha Christie book hit her, she said...
Maybe Agatha didn't like her hairstyle. You know?
It's like, buy this!
I need royalties. My family has to eat.
No, jeez.
I'm not sure why Agatha sounds like Mr.
I'm not sure either. She said
pay the fool that reads Murder on the Orient Express.
She said she believes in ghosts and said you can tell them to go away if you want to, if you don't want them here, but I don't mind. We have a large collection of historic Agatha Christie books in first editions, and it's only her which fly off. Stuart believes the shop is haunted. He states, we were both standing over on the opposite side of the room and saw it. The customer was walking by just here, and the first book came flying off. Then she walked around to the other side, and a different Agatha Christie book flew off the other shelf. I've seen similar things happen twice now. I believe in ghosts. There's got to be something out there. So museum curator Claire Howe, whose specific background is in archaeology, is a non-believer. She said, I think it happens when we have parties of school children running around upstairs. But Francisca and Stuart both remain adamant that they have witnessed paranormal activity. Francisca says, I've seen it happen 4 times in a year. It seems odd that it's always Agatha Christie books, especially as we are the only Agatha Christie museum in the country, and when we have the ladder made from the floorboards standing there in the corner of the gift shop. She would have run around on those floorboards in her childhood home. In her old age, Agatha Christie said she never dreamed of Greenway, her home on River Dart. It was Ashfield, the elegant I'm going to say it wrong again, the Troike Villa, where she was born in 1890, that her dreams took her back to. At the end of her autobiography, the crime writer fondly recalled, "How well I know every detail there. The frayed red curtains leading to the kitchen, the sunflower brass fender in the hall gate, the turkey carpet on the stairs, the big shabby schoolroom with its dark blue and gold embossed wallpaper." Ashfield was the setting for a happy childhood. It was also where her daughter Rosalind was born and where the author's parents lived out their lives. She begged her mother to keep it on after the death of her father Frederick when she was 11 years old. But in 1938, Dame Agatha sold the Barton Road property and bought Greenway in Galpton for £6,000. "Ashfield was my home. Ashfield, my home has changed," she lamented. The boys' grammar school in Barton Road had been built during the previous decade and blocked the views down to the sea, which she had loved in her youth. She stated once it had been all countryside out of there. 3 villas up the hill, and then the road petered out into country. The lush green fields where I used to go to look at the lambs in the spring had given way to a mass of small houses. No one we knew lived in our road any longer. Poor Agatha. That's sad. In 1960, developers unveiled a scheme to bulldoze Ashfield and a neighboring villa and replace them with blocks of flats and petrol stations. The proposal was turned down because of objections to filling station, but the principle of new homes were agreed to. Dame Agatha heard about the design on her former home and rushed to the solicitor to see if she could buy back the property and make it a gift, perhaps as an old person's home. Okay, but it was too late. The process of creating a new estate had begun. More than a year later, she summoned up the resolution to drive to Barton Road, where she wrote the meanest, shoddiest little houses I had ever seen. There was nothing left except for the defiant remains of what had been a monkey puzzle struggling to exist in a cluttered backyard. She said that Ashfield was everything that went with it and was over. Only a ghost of a little girl playing with a hoop would linger in the place where she had once been so happy. Avid Christie fans Brett Hawthorne believes Ashfield was the custodian of many of the keyholes to unlocking the character of Dame Agatha, but incredibly, it perhaps the most colossal lack of foresight ever perpetrated by a local council. The planners allowed the property to be obliterated. Today, only a blue plaque fixed to a stone beside a pavement commemorates the birthplace of the world's most famous crime writer.
Well, that's just sad.
That's very sad.
I'm really surprised the Historical Society didn't have something to do with that.
Right, exactly. And then, I can kind of see now why the museum's haunted when you've got these floorboards from her most fondest memories, sitting up in the corner with her books just sitting there being sold.
She's angry that her childhood home was torn down.
Right.
And that's why she's throwing books at people. It's probably the descendants of those people that had it torn down.
Oof.
This is a letter the Navy sent to Congressman who was demanding answers about UFOs. The lawmaker wanted details about various sightings due to concerns that the incidents might indicate domestic security threats to the United States. This is by Joseph Trevithick. Last year, Congressman Mark Walker, a Republican from North Carolina and a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security, wrote a letter to the U.S. Navy demanding answers regarding sightings of what are commonly referred to as unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Now the War Zone has obtained a complete copy of the service responses to these questions about how it is recording and assessing incidences involving what it calls unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP, which the lawmaker has already said he felt was frustratingly insufficient. UAP is, I guess, the new catch-all term for UFOs, apparently, when the militaries talk about it, or the government.
The unidentified...
It's unidentified aerial phenomenon, because they don't want to call
Aerial
it
phenomenon,
UFO.
okay.
On March 5th, 2020, the Navy released an unredacted copy of the letter, which then Undersecretary of the Navy Thomas Modly wrote on July 31st, 2019, in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. Politico was first to report on this letter after obtaining a copy in September 2019. but did not publish or otherwise reproduce it in full. Walker had sent his initial letter addressed to then Secretary of the Navy Richard Spencer on July 16, 2019, and had made a copy publicly available on July 29th, which the War Zone reported on at the time. It is also worth noting that Maudley has been acting Secretary of the Navy since Spencer resigned in November 2019. There have been a number of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled training ranges and designated airspace in recent years, Maudley wrote in this July 31st response. The department, not the department, that's a whole different thing.
Whole different place.
Oh, the department. Oh, dear God, I just let my bowels go. The Department of the Navy, or commonly known as DON, takes these reports very seriously and continues to log sightings and fully investigate the accounts. The letter below reads, it's addressed to the Honorable Mark Walker, U.S. House Representative, Washington, D.C. Dear Representative Walker, thank you for your July 16, 2019 letter regarding the unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, featured in recent media reports. There have been numbers of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled training ranges and designated airspaces in recent years. The Department of the Navy, DON, takes these reports very seriously and continues to log sightings and fully investigate the accounts. The wide proliferation and availability of inexpensive unmanned aerial systems, UAS, or as you might call drones, has increasingly made airspace deconfliction an issue for all aviators. Naval air crews have been provided reported guidance to determine the frequency and location of UAS operating in training areas. The guidance supports objective data-driven analysis of incursions. The DON continues to dedicate resources to tracking and investigating of reports that could affect the safety of our aircraft. The DON is aligned with the Department of Defense, or the DoD, and integrates partners on this effort. The DON is leveraging established relationships with sister services, other DoD offices, the U.S. intelligence community, and other U.S. government agencies that will help us to better understand these incursions into training areas. We will continue to ensure all efforts are closely coordinated with these organizations in this increasingly complex aviation environment. The Department remains committed to providing Congress with updates on our efforts in the most proactive and transparent manner possible. We will continue consultations with the House Armed Services Committee, which continues to be our primary entry point into the House for all updated related to this topic. I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts on this issue and your continued support to our mission. Sincerely, Thomas Maudley.
Was Thomas, from the Revolutionary War?
He might have been. You don't know. Maudley's letter makes no mention of a number of high-profile UAP incidents involving Navy FA-18CD Hornets or FA-18EF Super Hornet fighter jets dating back to at least 2004. You can read more about these particular events in detail in the past War Zone stories. It also does not discuss any Navy connection to the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program, or AATIP, or its predecessor, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, which existed for various periods of time within the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. The wide proliferation and availability of inexpensive unmanned aerial systems, drones, has increasingly made airspace deconfliction an issue for our aviators. Naval air crews have been provided reported guidance to determine the frequency and location of UAS operating in training areas, Maudley wrote to Walker. The guidance supports objective, data-driven analysis of incursions. The DON continues to dedicate resources to the tracking and investigation of reports that could affect the safety of our air crews. Walker's original letter was very clearly asking for information about the highly publicized incidents that publicized incidents that fighter pilots had reported both to their superiors and in the press, which involved purported flying craft capable of extreme levels of speed and maneuverability. The Congressman's inquiry was not explicitly concerned about incidences involving smaller drones breaching restricted airspace around U.S. military facilities or threatening U.S. areas overseas, which has also become an increasing issue in recent years. The DON is aligned with the Department of Defense and the interagency partners on this effort. Maudley's letters continue. The DON is leveraging established relationships with sister services, other DoD offices in the U.S. intelligence community, and other U.S. government agencies that will help us to determine and understand incursions into training areas. Modley's letters ends by saying that the Navy would continue to work with the House of Representatives via the House Armed Services Committee, of which Walker is not a member. It does not promise to provide him or the House Committee on Homeland Security any of these additional information or data on reported UAP sightings or physical evidence thereof that he sought. Walker had sent his letter in the first place because of his position that reported UAP incidences represent a threat to Homeland Security, including to commercial and civilian aircraft, as well as military ones flying in U.S. airspace. Walker's position is not entirely unreasonable, and the War Zone has reported in the past that some of the UAP sightings worried naval aviators for the same basic safety reasons. Among other things, the congressman's comments to Politico last year seems perhaps even more understandable after having read the full text of Motley's response as well. While I am encouraged, the Undersecretary of the Navy confirmed that UAP encounters are fully investigated, there is frustration with the lack of answers to specific questions about the threat that superior aircraft flying in the United States airspace may pose. Walker told the outlet in a statement, if the Navy believes that China or Russia possesses advanced aerospace technologies that represent a national security vulnerability, the American people have the right to know what their government is doing about it. It's unclear if Walker or any other members of Congress have followed up or otherwise succeeded in obtaining additional information on this issue. At least some senators, as well as the President Donald J. Trump, have received classified briefings on the UAP sightings and what the Navy has been doing in response. However, in September 2019, the Navy told Politico that it had not received any further requests from legislators on the topic since Walker's letter. We are going to stay on this issue and follow through like we said we wanted to, Walker had said his statement at the time. Whatever the case, the general public safety and national security concerns surrounding UAP sightings that drove Walker to write his original letter certainly haven't disappeared from the general public's consciousness.
Ew.
So, is it China? China got a good aircraft? China's aircrafts are huge and fast. Huge.
Poor China right now.
Or is it?
We're just going to blame everything on China.
Or is it a UFO or UAP, as they like to call it now?
I think it's interesting that, the guy reached out, he wanted information, and there was nothing given to him. I mean,
it's military, so obviously there's limited information that you're going to get at any given time, because it's classified information. So
I get that, but nothing? I don't know.
He gave him something. He said that there was UAPs and that they're investigating, so that's something that they're admitting that there are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Phenomena. So, the next one is called My Star Child by Susan Demeter. A lost memory that came back to me while doing some research for a book that I am writing. It was a sunny winter day when I first met him. I felt the warm rays of the sun streaming through the window, and like dust particles in the air, he too became illuminated by sunbeams. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old at the time. It was very cold outside with a lot of snow on the ground that I could see on the other side of the window pane, and I had to stay indoors to play. I was an only child at that point, so maybe it was out of boredom or loneliness that I conjured him up. He was a little boy, and he hid behind the curtains of the big bay window in the front room of the very first house that I had grown up in. I called him Blue Boy because although...
Blue Boy.
Hello, Blue Boy. Shut up. Because although he was a normal-looking kid of the 1970s in every other way, his skin color was very white with a tinge of blue, and his mischievous eyes were a bright blue color. Now, there are bright blue people in Kentucky, so...
I'm just curious. It sounds like maybe the genie from Disney's Aladdin has showed up in this latest. And he's totally hey, I'm the genie in the 1970s. I want to be like Disco Baby.
Oh my gosh. I remember being
I wonder if it's Will Smith or if it's the ghost of Robin Williams.
Ooh, let's hope it's Robin.
It would make sense for his Robin. He did have bell bottoms. He was from the 70s.
I was going to say, he was from the 70s. I remember being so happy to have a friend to play with.
You ain't never met a friend like me. No.
Being behind the dark curtain at the house of Cottonwood Drive. We would meet there behind the voluminous drapery, and when out of sight of any grown-ups, we would fly. Even this is sounding more and more like the genie. Even as a child, I understood that stepping behind the curtain was a means of magical transport. It, it was there where I first began my little experiments in the bilocation that continue to this day. With my stuffed teddy bear clutched tightly in my hands, the blue boy and I traveled beyond the stars to strange, forgotten spaces.
Now she's went to Peter Pan. She's just went from the genie to Neverland.
To Peter Pan. Sometimes, after long shamanic, dreamlike, I don't know what shamanic means.
Shamans.
Oh, okay. So now I've learned something. Long shamanic, dreamlike travels. My mom would find me asleep, tucked away behind the curtains of that big front window.
She smoked with peyote.
Decades later, when I became acquainted with the 12th century account of the Green Children of Woolpit, I wondered if there was any connection to the story and my own experience with the little pale blue boy. The Green Children, a brother and sister, were found by farmers working their fields at harvest time near some ditches that had been excavated to trap wolves at St. Mary's of the Wolf Pits, also known as Woolpit in England. Huh, I did not know that.
Neither did I.
European witches in later centuries, who I felt a strong connection to, were known to shapeshift into wolves when they conducted their night battles.
Werewolves.
Were the Green Children little witches who got caught by the wolf traps? Their skin was green, their clothes were made from unknown cloth, and initially their speech was unintelligible to people who found them. Eventually, when they learned to communicate in English, they claimed to have come from a faraway land and that they were magically transported to Woolpit after wandering into a cave. Were the travelers from behind the curtains like we were, made up of imagination and bits of dust and starlight? Maybe, but unlike the Green Children who emerged from the dark underground cavern, my imaginary traveling companion rode in on a sunbeam. I never knew the name of the star child, nor do I fully recall the strange places that we visited or the weird language that we spoke, only that we spoke between us. I do remember how happy I was to have a magical friend. He stopped appearing to me sometime after my sister Diana was born.
You ain't never had a friend now. Oh, you got a friend now.
You got a friend now. She said that she does have a newly updated online cupboard called Out of My Mind's Eye. So you guys can go out there and check that out.
Intriguing. I hope she wasn't on LSD at that time. She was just a young little girl after all.
It was a very sweet story.
It was sweet.
I think that...
bilocation is an interesting kind of topic as well. You know, that's shamanic bilocation, or sometimes astral travel. Astral travel and bilocation are kind of actually different, because bilocation, you're in two places at one time, but they all kind of like fit together a little bit. Something strange is going on with the North Star by Raphael Etzer.
In the neighborhood?
In the neighborhood. It keeps breaking astronomers' models of how stars are supposed to act. A long exposure image shows stars appearing to whirl around Polaris, the North Star, which appears fixed in the sky. Something's up with the North Star. People have watched the North Star for centuries. The bright star, also known as Polaris, is almost directly above Earth's North Pole and serves as a landmark in the sky for travelers without a compass. It's also Earth's closest Cepheid, a type of star that pulses regularly in diameter and brightness. And Polaris is part of a binary system. It's got a dimmer sister known as Polaris B that we can watch circling it from Earth. However, as we learn more, it is becoming clearer that we understand less about Polaris, wrote the authors of the new paper on the famous star. The problem with Polaris is that no one can agree on how big or distant it is. Astrophysicists have a few ways of calculating the mass, age, and distance of a star like Polaris. One method is a stellar evolution model, said new study co-author Hilding R. Nielsen on astrophysics of the University of Toronto. Researchers can study the brightness, color, and rate of pulsation of the star and use that data to figure out how big and bright it is and what stage of life it's in. Once these details are worked out, Nielsen told Life Science, it's not hard to figure out how far away the star is. It's fairly simple math once you know how bright the star really is and how dim it looks from Earth. These models are especially precise for Cepheids because their rate of pulsing is directly related to their luminosity or brightness. That makes it easy to calculate the distance to any of these stars. Astronomers are so sure they understand the relationship that Cepheids have become critical tools for measuring distances all across the universe. But there are other ways to study Polaris, and those methods don't agree with the stellar evolution models. Polaris is what we call an astrometric binary, Nielsen said, which means you can actually see its companion going around it, sort of like a circle being drawn around Polaris, and that takes about 26 years. Researchers haven't yet made detailed observations of the full circuit by Polaris B, but they've seen enough of the companion star in recent years to have a pretty detailed picture of what the orbit looks like. With that information, you can apply Newton's law of gravity to measure the masses of the two stars, Nielsen said. That information combined with the new Hubble Space Telescope parallax measurements, another way to calculate the distance to the star, lead to very precise numbers on Polaris's mass and distance. Those measurements say it's about 3.45 times the mass of our Sun, give or take 0.75 solar masses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, are you giving this so that...
I'm hoping that our listeners are physically doing the math right now. That's way less than the mass you get from stellar evolution models, which suggest a value of about 7 times the mass of the Sun. The star system is weird in other ways. Calculation of the age of Polaris B suggests that the star is much older than its bigger sibling, which is unusual for a binary system. Typically, the two stars are about the same age. Nielsen, together with Haley Lynn, an undergraduate study and researcher at the University of Toronto, generated a huge set of models of Polaris to see whether those models would reconcile all the data known about the system. They couldn't. One possibility is that at least one of the measurements here is just wrong, the researchers wrote. Polaris is especially a difficult star to study, Nielsen said. Located above Earth's North Pole, it's outside the field of view of most telescopes. And the telescopes that have the necessary equipment for precisely measuring the star's properties are usually designed to study much fainter and more distant stars. Polaris is too bright for those instruments. In fact, it's blinding for them. But the data researchers do have seen trustworthy, and there's no obvious reason to doubt the information, Nielsen said. Those findings led Nielsen and Blinn to another stranger explanation. Perhaps the main star of Polaris' system was once two stars, and they slammed together several million years ago. Such a binary collision, Nielsen said, can rejuvenate stars, pulling in extra material and making the stars look like they just went through the fountain of youth. Stars that result from binary collisions don't neatly fit the stellar evolution models, and such an event could explain this discrepancy found with Polaris. This would be an unlikely scenario, but not impossible, the researchers wrote. So far, none of the solutions is wholly satisfying. It is challenging to draw significant conclusions beyond the fact that Polaris continues to be an enduring mystery, and the more we measure, the less we understand, Nielsen and Blinn wrote. So, I'm not really sure where the paranormal comes in that.
I was just getting ready to ask you, that's a little different than what we normally report on, bud.
Sometimes you got to throw in a little science for people, okay? They needed a little break, and not to mention that that's where those UAPs are coming from.
I feel like Polaris. We should.
That's why we don't know what's happening there, because
that's where the aliens are. I think that we should add, little sound bite before that story. Say, this is the time you go get your coffee and come back.
Ha ha ha, very funny. You're funny.
Mine, however, my next story is a little more on target. Possessed victim crawled to ceiling and hovered for 6 hours in horror exorcism. Wait a minute. So this story is about someone who was getting an exorcism and hovered on the ceiling for 6 hours?
Oh, that's not unusual.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's an exorcism. I'm surprised the bed wasn't in the area.
Oh my gosh.
I need a young priest and an old priest.
Oh, so this one is by Sophie. Yeah. Sophie. Sophie Jackson. Sorry, Sophie. So Ron Phil Enright, Archbishop and Chief Exorcist of the Sacred Order of St. Michael the Archangel. I'm having troubles today. Man, I'm having trouble. I need to get new glasses. The virus has kept me in too long. I've lost the ability to read.
I'm hearing excuses. That's all I hear from here. Really, she drank a lot right before we started this podcast. Yes, that's what it is. And so she's slurring because she's drunk.
Whole lot. Oh, so we have an exorcism. We have an exorcism that's about to happen. It says yes, just like Hollywood, with victims often having gray-like skin. A Catholic exorcist has claimed that he once witnessed a victim possessed by a demon float up to the ceiling and stay there for 6 hours. I would like to see the video footage of that one.
I can only imagine.
I would like to see this. So, Father Ron here, who has taken part of thousands of exorcisms, recalled a particularly disturbing incident while appearing as a guest on the podcast The Conspiracy Show with Richard Straight. He said, "In all the years I've done this, I could say I have just done about 2,000 involving rituals. In 2,000 years, I'd say maybe I've witnessed at least a dozen times people that would actually levitate." The Archbishop and Chief Exorcist of the Sacred Order of St. Michael the Archangel said the levitations always started the same way. He explained, and that is that they would actually come up from whatever they were laying in. If they were laying on the floor, they'd come up from the floor and all the way up to the ceiling and stay there. It defies the laws of gravity.
Hello, Reverend Ron.
They would actually be hovering just overhead. And it's a series of prayers and focusing. Really? We're going to do this now? Yeah. Oh, I gotta go, guys. Will's exercising me. Gotta go. Prayers and focusing on what was actually taking place. Focusing in would be where the priest would largely okay.
You're just jealous you can't say the St. Michael prayer.
Would be largely responsible along with his assistant and any investigators that were in the room. Because everyone is praying, and so the individual would slowly come down. We had one individual that was up there for 6 hours, and no one knew really what to do.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't stop there, because it was like, no one knew. He's just hovering, and everybody's like in the room like, where did so-and-so go? I don't know. He was here. He's been gone for about 6 hours. Holy crap, there he is. He's up on the ceiling. How'd you get up there, crikey? Come on down now. Come on down.
Oh my gosh.
Get down from there. What's wrong with you?
They're taking fly swatters.
Squirting me with water. I said get down. Get down.
Stop it.
Like a cat. Get down. Get down.
As a result, I'm standing there, and another bishop, who's an exorcist, he's standing there, and he's never witnessed this before either. Describing typical exorcisms, the holy man would...
The reverend just tiptoed out the door and said, peace, come out. This is more than I
Describing typical exorcisms, the holy man also claimed the scenes were just like Hollywood, and described the victims of possession and having unhealthy grayish skin like a cadaver. Afflicted people who curse priests in Latin and use the psychic powers of demons to do so, he added. The priest says the individual would actually say words, and in some cases it's in Latin, and in some cases it's actually in other languages that they have never been taught. It's always insulting words with regards to whomever walks into the room. If there's a group of people in the room, the victim will look around and point to an individual and tell them, and say out loud whatever negative thing is going on in their lives. Anything to do with affairs to heinous things behind closed doors. It seems that the person, the victim, has inside knowledge of these things and speak of them in front of a crowd. It comes after another exorcist, Bob Larson, shared how he once saw a woman pick up a man twice her size. Oh, let me start this over again. He once saw a woman pick up a man twice her size and throw him across the room. Sorry, it says her across the room, but I'm assuming they're saying that a woman picked up a man that's twice her size and threw him
across the room.
Yeah, across the room.
I think that's what they are saying.
Yes, I think that's what they're saying.
I mean, I'm not sure. They wrote it funny, but I think that's the idea they're trying to come across. I think that's the
gist.
Yeah. Exorcisms.
I think I need an exorcism today.
Exorcisms always scare me because, dark and light. And whether you believe in Satan or not, I do believe that there is evil and there's definitely good.
Right.
And you can cross. There's more gray than there is like either way. But there are definitely things out there that could be evil, whether you believe in the traditional evil of like Satan or not. Demons have found their way in every culture, all the way all the way back to Egypt. They had demons in Egypt, but they weren't Lucifer's fallen angels demons, but they were still the demons of their belief system.
Well, I mean, it's a very weird thing because I mean we know that exorcisms definitely exist. We know that they have happened, and we know that things have went really wrong when exorcisms have happened. So, I mean, just on that principle alone, I mean, obviously something happens during exorcisms. And I mean, I know they've talked about exorcisms that can last for days and days and days. And
well, if you listen to Catholic exorcists, the priests who actually are part of that group, because they go to Rome, and they were trained specifically,
right?
And then they're sent all around the world. But years, it's not just days and weeks; it's sometimes years and years in order to finally break the demon's hold on someone, and then it's a constant rechecking back with them to make sure that they're still okay.
Right. And I mean, just with all of that constant, I don't know, toll on your body of, I don't know. There's just a lot there that I think, I mean, I hope that there's some good that comes out of exorcisms, but I've seen so much bad things that came out of them.
And that's because that's what you hear about.
That's true. Very true.
Rendlesham Forest UFO sighting becomes legend like King Arthur by Nick Rigby, the BBC News. A new documentary about one of the most famous UFO sightings in the UK concludes with mystery with legend, status like Loch Ness of King Arthur.
You gonna keep that up for the whole article?
I just might. You can't stop me. The film Codename Rendlesham looks at the reports by US airmen who claim...
I can't even understand what you're saying.
I'm sorry with my Cockney accent. The film codenamed now I can't say it. I can only say it if I do it. The film codenamed Rendlesham looks at the reports by U.S. airmen who claim to have seen a UFO in Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, in December 1980. Theories range from it being an alien visitation to a hoax. Academic David Clark said researchers were at an impasse, and the longer it goes on, the more it becomes a legend. On the 26th of December 1980, several United States Air Force security personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge reported that they investigated lights in the surrounding forests. In 1983, a memo by Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt was released by the U.S. government describing an encounter with an apparent UFO, or now UAP as they would like to call it. It made headlines, news in the UK, which has ballooned into an industry of theories covered in books, dramas, documentaries, and websites suggesting it was either an actual alien visitation, a secret military aircraft, a misinterpretation of natural lights, or the beams of a Fordness lighthouse. Or a hoax. Well, he covered all the bases there.
Or a hoax.
At
least he's willing to say, hey, this might be crap.
The new film hears from former USAF personnel, UFO enthusiasts, skeptics, and academics. Mr. Fearson, director, said it examines the elements that have made this one of our great modern legends. Mr. Fearson, who grew up in Walton on the Naze in Essex, we got some nice names. Walton on the Naze in Essex, got interested in the story after going camping in Rendlesham Forest and seeing the beam from the lighthouse on Arford Ness, which some believe may have been mistaken for a UFO in 1980. Researching the film, he was fascinated to find that the UFO film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Special Edition, was in cinemas at the time, and other science fiction films such as Hangar 18 were from that era. He said reports of the sightings that include suggestions of car engines cutting out and burnt markings found in the forest could have been influenced by these films. Academic researchers into the UFO reports Dr. David Clark of Sheffield Hallam University said in the film, now, it may have been a lighthouse, it may have been some natural phenomenon. That is beside the point. We've reached an impasse. There are those who can only see it in black and white terms. Aliens or people from the future came here. Or it's the skeptical? Or
skeptical?
I think that's supposed to be, I think they're trying to say skeptical, but they spelled it wrong. Or it's the skeptical version that people are lying and that they have been misled by ordinary things. The more it is elaborated on, the more it becomes a legend. Ian Ridpath, an astronomy writer who believes the sightings can be partly put down to a beam from the lighthouse, said some of the witnesses have changed their stories. New bits of information have come out we hadn't heard of. Really, what we are seeing is the creation of a modern myth, and I don't think it will ever die. The film, produced by Chill Factor Films, is set to be screened in Woodbridge later this year.
So they're talking about movie deals.
Movie deals. This next article is a little bit in the coronavirus kind of topic. Conspiracy theory. Incinerated coronavirus bodies, North Korean missiles, and airplane spillages among theories to explain disturbing black rain falling over Japan. Incinerated coronavirus bodies, nuclear fallout, and pollution were among theories to explain mysterious black rain falling on parts of Japan. Soot-colored... Oh, this was by Rory Butler. Sorry, I almost didn't give him a shout out. Soot-colored rainwater was reported to authorities on his social media by people living in several wards in Saitama Prefecture in Japan on the 2nd of March. The majority of black rain reports came from the city of Hasudu, but other affected areas included Ajeo, Iwatsuki, and Kuki, also in Saitama. Hasudu city officials issued a statement saying they were investigating the matter after receiving multiple complaints of black puddles in roads and on cars, according to Sora News 24.
Yeah. So, ugh.
Some Saitama citizens expressed concern over possible nuclear-related materials in the atmosphere, many on Twitter using #BlackRain. Black rain came down today over a wide area, said one person on Twitter. It looks like oil and is under investigation. They said that they checked radiation levels and nothing unusual was found. Black rain is disturbing, they added. You think? Another person... Chubby rain. Another person wrote that it's a little too scary, while another said, that's about as bad an omen as you can get these days. Hasuda city officials were said to have measured radiation levels and found nothing out of the ordinary. However, they added that the cause of the black rainwater was a mystery and further investigation was necessary. Another Twitter user wrote, are they secretly burning the bodies of corona victims? While another said, didn't North Korea fire missiles on that day? One person on social media speculated whether oil had fallen from a plane passing overhead. Another, sounding slightly more panicked, wrote, this is fine, everything's fine.
Ew.
This is fine, everything's fine.
Everything's
okay,
fine.
It's okay. People who witnessed the black rain covering their homes and property were understandably unnerved, as similar ominous signs were also reported during the Second World War. The United States dropped the world's first deployed atomic bomb from a B-29 bomber over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on 6 August 1945. 3 days later, the U.S. dropped a second A-bomb over Nagasaki. An estimated 120,000 people were killed during both catastrophic blasts. Radioactive material was sent up into the atmosphere at the time, causing black rain to fall over the area of nuclear attack. Scientists who tested a school uniform worn by a girl exposed to the rain, contaminated by the Hiroshima bombing, were able to detect cesium-137, which is a radioactive isotope 70 years later. However, no nuclear activity was reported in Saitama, and some said the likely explanation of the black rain was pollution, Sora News 24 said. It later emerged that a gigantic fire had broken out in Hasuda around the time of the rainfall. It was a blaze at what it was thought to be a large commercial building that was speculated to be the cause of the black rain. It's pretty easy to see how much the smoke could mix in with a dye much of the downwind precipitation black, Sora News said 24. Other speculation about the fire's link to the black rain also appeared online. I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but there was fire in that area the same day, one person wrote. I think it was caused by a fire in the area, said another. It was a fire in a plastics factory. There you go, said a third.
So it was a fire.
It might have been a fire.
Okay.
Maybe. One Sora News 24 reporter said it doesn't explain why Hasuda City never acknowledged this on their website. At a time when the dispersion of information is more important than ever, it's very unsettling that they were either unaware of the gigantic fire in their own city or didn't feel it was necessary to mention while people online were speculating about mass cremations and North Korean missiles. They added.
Ew. You are not getting the fun, happy-go-lucky stories today, bud. Your stories are very dark or very...
I'm giving you all the happy stories. Now it's time for the creepy.
Cursed ventriloquist doll found dumped in a river, burned by terrified neighbors. And here we have Sophie again.
Oh, Sophie. She's back. Hello, Sophie.
Oh, Sophie Jackson. Okay. Sophie writes, a ventriloquist doll mistaken for a dead body was branded as cursed after it was pulled from the river and took numerous attempts to burn. The sinister human-sized ventriloquist doll was mistaken for a dead body when it was hauled out of a river by villagers in Mexico who were so creeped out they decided to burn it. Unfortunately, the doll, found wrapped in a blanket in the small town of San Antonio Las Esperanza, wouldn't burn, and so the community decided it was cursed. Ugh. In a video, the doll is
found its way to the town of Hope.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Las Esperanza.
Las Esperanza.
Hope is cursed in Las Esperanza.
So in a video, the doll is seen lying on the earth with one eye blackened and burned, but the other bright blue and staring. Its hinged jaw gives the doll a creepy and scarred appearance. Adding to the air of uneasiness it radiates. Ew.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, the human-shaped dummy was initially mistaken for the dead body, but luckily it soon became apparent it wasn't real when it was unwrapped from the shawl.
Must have been a huge dummy.
Yeah, it had to be pretty big.
They don't say a child's body or anything, they say a dead body.
Yeah, it looked like a dead body, so...
That's a huge dummy.
However, it remains a mystery as to who the previous owner of the spooky mannequin was and why this person went to such great lengths to dispose of it in such a strange way. After several attempts, the villagers finally managed to burn it, local media reports. The story has since reached...
Use the pitchforks.
The story has since reached Oscar-winning film director Guillermo del Toro, best known for making dark fantasy movies like The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth.
Great movies.
I loved Pan's Labyrinth all the way up until the end, and then I couldn't stand it. And I'm not giving away any spoilers, guys. If you want to watch Pan's Labyrinth, it's a great movie. I just didn't like the ending.
Great movie. All the way through.
He retweeted several photos of the scary doll. Local journalist Caesar, I'm going to say his name real wrong. Local journalist Caesar Bienrostro disputed the area of a supernatural presence and claimed locals had failed to burn the doll at the first attempt because it was damp. Once it had dried, they found it easier to set it alight, he said. Bonrostro and a YouTube journalist known as Oxlack Investigator visited the man... Investigated the man who made the doll, named Julio, who said he sold it on years ago, but couldn't remember who had bought it. According to Julio, the doll was made with an epoxy resin that was difficult to burn.
Was it difficult to burn?
I would think that anything with like an epoxy resin would probably be pretty difficult to burn, especially when you first pulled it out of the river.
Dummies are creepy.
Dummies are very creepy. Like,
no offense, Jeff Dunham, but dummies are creepy.
They're very creepy. I had the old bozo clown when I was growing up. That was the one that was supposed to teach you how to talk like a ventriloquist. I don't know if you ever saw those when you were a kid, but
the poltergeist clown.
It was exactly like the poltergeist clown. And until Poltergeist came out, I loved that clown. After Poltergeist, no, clown had to go.
And now she's afraid of clowns.
It was over with.
Now it's time for a ghost story.
Ghost stories.
The events that started it all by Easy for Cheese. People, you really need to work on your screen names. You really need to work on your screen names.
I'm like, I get no terror out of that.
Easy for Cheese writes, keep in mind this is just the story that started most of the paranormal experiences that my friend and I have experienced. This is far from all of what has happened, but this is where it gets scary for us. So this story starts back in 2015. Before then, I have had a few paranormal experiences, some shadows, voices, but nothing that really shook me up. However, there was one night I was driving with my friend that everything changed. Keep in mind we were about 17, 18 at the time, and are avid believers in the paranormal, but were fairly realistic with what caused certain events. This was about 10 at night, and we live in a small town near Spokane, Washington. All there was to do to get out of the house, in all reality, was drive around. We used to go to cemeteries frequently and would often go to the local small town one. The town has two. There's an old one dating back to the 1700s and is filled with unmarked graves and unmarked mass graves. The newer one claims to not have any unidentified graves, but everyone knows that is false. Again, we were driving around at 10 at night. We were desperate to get out of the house and had a full tank of gas and a four-wheel drive vehicle. During the entire drive, everything was like normal. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But when we were passing the cemetery, we had heard a blood-curdling scream, almost like someone was getting murdered. Keep in mind that there was no one out there, and no animals. There is no one we could have even remotely even hit. There was even, why would they even think they hit somebody?
I was going to
You didn't say anything about a thump.
Suddenly I heard a huge thump in my car.
There was a thud and a scream, and then, no, you didn't say that. There is no one we could have even remotely even hit. There was even a moment where we had lost complete control of our vehicle.
Okay, so that makes a little more sense. Like if you lost control of the vehicle, maybe he thought like somebody was laying down in the road, or yeah, he probably should have led with that.
Thankfully, we weren't going very fast and only lasted a moment. Sounds like a 7-year-old. Mm-hmm. We kept driving. We sure as hell weren't going to stop. And after that, we noticed a thick fog had developed and seemed to follow us around. The fog.
No.
The fog. That's an old reference to an awful movie. Followed us around. At this time, it was about midnight, and we had an overwhelming feeling of dread following us around. We had found that if
they had fog and dread following them around.
Dread and fog. Fog and dread. I hate those people. We had found that if we stayed in the part of town with people cameras, that the fog wouldn't follow all the way, but it still lingered nearby. We had a full tank of gas, like I mentioned earlier, so we literally stayed in the vehicle until the fog cleared up at the stroke of 3 a.m. Of course, 3 a.m. It's always 3 a.m.
It's always 3 a.m.
The fog literally dissolved, but at this point, we were still too shaken up to go home. At 5 a.m., we had finally calmed down just enough to go home. We lived 2 blocks from each other, so I dropped her off first. Starting to make sense. Then, while keeping each other on the phone, I went home. At both houses, we had parents, siblings, and I had my boyfriend there. Maybe not. Okay.
What?
Just keep going. So thankfully, we weren't alone. You never know. It could go. It could be it. However, we were still so anxious from what happened. What happened? We couldn't go to sleep immediately. Mm-hmm. My brother and his friend practiced Wicca and happened to know more than they probably should about demons and whatnot. I feel like they're playing with fire, but that's on them. Clearly, she knows nothing about Wicca.
I was going to say, clearly, they don't know anything about Wicca, but okay.
But we were talking to them about it, and they think we heard a death echo.
Ooh.
And there may have been bad spirits or entities following us. Now is the scariest, creepiest part of the whole ordeal. I was driving home from school. My friend worked part-time for their town, and her job was maintenance for the cemetery, such as mowing, weeding, flowers, watering. Just covering it all. Yes, you are. I wanted to stop by and say hi for a few cents. It was on my way home. I was driving by and saw her. However, I got this overwhelming feeling of dread and just overall felt like I needed to get out of there.
Did the fog show up?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Now, so I kept driving, but I still wanted to say hi, so I called her. I said, "Hey, sorry I just passed you at the cemetery, but I thought we could meet in a few for lunch or something." She asked me what I was talking about, and I told her I had told her that I drove by the cemetery. We really need to, sorry. When you write something, they make something called, spell check, and then you're supposed to, reread it, and then you edit it, and then you just make sure that it all makes sense.
I'm trying to follow this story. In my head, I've got this kid in the driver's seat, and he's driving to go see his friend who just talked about how his friend is at work. And then
at the cemetery.
So she's working at the cemetery.
Yeah, she's a caretaker at the cemetery. Her friend.
Okay, so all right, now I'm kind of, because I was like, why did this kid go to the cemetery?
To see her friend. He works at the friend. But not the friend who was in the car the previous night, I'm pretty sure. Not 100%, but pretty sure. She asked me what I was talking about, and I told her I had told her, I'm going to say that again, that I drove by the cemetery but didn't tell her about the feeling I had. She said, "Boo, I haven't been there for a bit, at least 10 minutes. I'm home now and haven't been making lunch." Now I'm confused because I legit saw her. So I immediately drove to her and saw her pick up and went up inside. Didn't have that feeling, and there she was in the same attire that I had just seen her wearing at the cemetery. She was obviously shook up, but still had to work out there. This ended up happening a couple more times too when I would drive by. She even told me herself that she saw herself there. However, when she did, it appeared she was covered in blood. She was driving up to work that day, but immediately turned around. After that, she refused to go back without a group of people. It's kind of hard to take people to your job every day. There was one instance where she was working and had an overwhelming sense of dread. She abandoned the mower and left. Did she leave the mower running?
You
You do belong! I'm out!
Well, I mean, she was already there.
If you're going to look like me, you better do my job for me. I'm going home. Shortly after I drove by again and saw what looked like her, we again talked to my brother and his friends, the supposed Wiccans, I'm going to say, about this, and they didn't have too much insight. I wonder why. They had a few thoughts about what it was, but nothing definitive.
They're like, we're out.
We have had multiple experiences since then with not just those feelings we had, but with things we have seen. I don't purposely go out there anymore, and in the 5 years since, I haven't seen that apparition anymore. However, we are looking for answers for what has happened, and if someone else has experienced anything like this. Currently, we are 23-24, and that's only a few people we can talk to about this. So any insight, advice, or knowledge would be greatly appreciated.
I mean, I've heard of things happening before where people have showed up, seen themselves in a distraught type manner of, blood on their face. Something's happened where they've seen themselves,
Especially after dropping acid.
kind of thing, and they came 5 minutes from getting into a bad crash or something like that, and so.
But she never talks about anything.
Nothing ever happening.
But was there.
I don't know. Maybe that was the day that if she had stayed mowing that grass, something would have happened. Who knows?
Maybe she got off that lawnmower and ran.
She got
off that lawnmower like she was being chased by a sharky. What do you got?
Oh, it's The Night I Saw the Shadow Man by Andrea Lane. At least she's better than your cheese guy.
Hey, don't make fun of Easy for Cheese, okay?
For cheese. All right. When I was just a little kid, my older sister and I always stay over at grandparents' house. At that time, I was only 5 and she was 7. I had another sister, but she was too young to do a sleepover. Anyway, whenever we would sleep over,
grammar check, and spell corrects. Takes 1 second.
We had to share a room and the bed. The room that we stayed in was on the 2nd floor next to the bathroom and my grandparents' bedroom. To a normal person, the room would seem off. There wasn't anything wrong with it.
There wasn't anything wrong with it. It was just a room. Just a bedroom.
I just think it's weird that she puts to a normal person the room would seem off, but then she goes on to say there wasn't anything wrong with it. Okay.
She's not a normal person.
Okay.
That's what she's getting at, I think.
The first time my sister and I slept over, like I said, I was 5. Some say that I was too young and don't remember too well, or that I just made up what happened. I thought that too until my mom gave birth to another daughter. Oh, guys.
Now she has a new sister.
Yes, now she has new sisters. We're trying to follow along here. Then 7 years later, she starts to sleep over at my grandparents' house, but not in the same room. Since I'd always end up waking everyone in the house up screaming, my grandmother blocked the room off from the rest of the house after I told her about the shadow behind the light. Now, you might be wondering, what happened? Or what shadow? Here's the story. My older sister and I were getting ready for bed the first night over at their grandparents' house. We were so excited but also nervous because it was our first sleepover. Anyway, time passed quickly and we were all tucked into bed. Our grandfather went to bed early while our grandmother stayed awake. On the other hand, we couldn't fall asleep. After staying up and talking for a few minutes, my sister grew tired, even though she was wide awake before. Another minute passed and she was asleep. And just like that, I was alone. I rolled over to get more room in the bed, but I ended up frozen. I saw the lamp. It was a tall lamp in the room, and light shined in on it from a window. But that wasn't what made me freeze. There was a figure, or as I call it, the Shadow Man. The Shadow Man wore a top hat, and that's all I could really make out of the figure. I stared at it for what seemed like an eternity, and yet it didn't move. So me, being a kid, I thought that it was just a shadow from the window shining into my room. But I was wrong. Right as I was about to turn back over to face my sister, it moved. The Shadow Man was moving towards me.
It grabbed its top hat and said, "Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Hello, my ragtime gal. You'll set my heart on fire."
So I did the only thing that a 5-year-old could do at that time.
She screamed?
She screamed.
That sounds right.
And it went away. I don't know where it went, but it was gone. Of course, my whole family woke up and came into the room. And when I realized it wasn't just 9:30, it was 4 a.m. right on the dot. Thank God it wasn't 3.
It wasn't 3.
It was not 3. So it was 4 a.m. right on the dot. This went on every time I slept over. But then I got older and stopped. That's when my grandmother shut down the room. Now I'm 16 and still see the Shadow Man in my nightmares. So I do ponder if it was real or not. But one thing is still off about it all. Because every once in a while, everyone in my house will bolt up at 4 a.m. and we all don't know why. What I do know is whatever the Shadow Man is, it isn't good.
Perhaps she has a demonic attachment.
Perhaps her screaming at 4 a.m. just reprogrammed everyone's internal clock and everybody's waking up at 4 a.m. for no reason.
She was the rooster for the family.
Yeah, she was the rooster waking up screaming every morning at 4. So
this one's called Childhood Entities by Welcome to My Freaky Freak Show. Welcome to My Freaky Freak Show is his screen name.
You see, no, that's a great screen name.
I mean, that's a good start. Let's hope he actually writes well. Let's find out. Okay. I've had paranormal type experiences as far back as I can remember. As a baby, until about 7 years old, I lived in or right beside an old haunted house. The house was built sometime in the 1800s. Me, my mom, my dad, and my brother lived in the house for few of those 7 years, and the remaining time we lived in a mobile home right directly beside it within 100 feet. There was something happening every night, whether it was lights turning on or off, to hearing someone walking up and down the stairs of the house very loudly, to even seeing an apparition. Like I said, it was always something. I wish I had a camera or recorder back then. I would have gotten something on it, I'm sure. Even people outside of the house would know it was haunted. We lived in the country, but our nearest neighbors would go by and later ask my mom or dad, "You got the electric fixed in the old house?" And they'd say, "No, why?" And the neighbors would be like, "Well, when we rode past, it looked like there was lights on them upstairs." The crazy part, there was nothing but the old wires hanging down. No place to even put a light bulb. There were 2 occasions that really shook me. The first one was one day, me and a female cousin of mine were playing and we ran away from her brother into the old house. When we get in there, there's this board you could put across the door as a way to lock it. So that's what we did. Once we did that, we look up the stairs and there is this man wearing a red shirt and with blue pants. And you could see right through him. Me and my cousin looked at each other like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Once we got it gripped, we screamed as we tried to remove the board from across the door, and once the door was open, we flew past her brother, and he was like, "WTF?" So we told him, and even though he had seen things around there as well, he shrugged it off as we were crazy. The second time I was scared out of my mind, it was only me. my mom and the same female cousin home in the mobile home beside the old house, and my mom was cooking in the kitchen. Me and my cousin were in my brother's room watching Baywatch, LOL. My cousin gets up to go to the kitchen for something to drink, so I was alone in the room and creeped out. I'm always creeped out whenever, Michael Hasselhoff comes on, too.
Yeah.
Especially if he starts singing. That's creepy. I always felt like I was being watched, so I decided to go in there with him. I go to walk out of the bedroom door and feel the urge to stop and look to my left, and OMG. I felt frozen from fear at what I saw. The emoji of the screaming face.
Ooh, bum, bum, bum.
It was only a head, face, peeping out of the bathroom door with piercing black eyes staring at me, what I felt like into my soul. It almost appeared to be an old Native American man, maybe woman. It didn't speak, just stared. I was so scared, on edge by things paranormal and non-paranormal going on, I'm not sure if it was a good or bad presence. However, I do feel as though it follows me wherever I go. I say that not only because I feel it, but one time I was at the same female cousin. Seems to be a connection with this female cousin. I was with I feel I was at the same female cousin I was with that night. It's seen it years later and was taking pictures, and when I had the film developed, there was pictures someone took of me. And I don't like having pictures taken of me, so I had my hand in front of my face, and in between my fingers it looked like the same face I had seen years earlier, only it was bluish color instead. After I seen that face that day, it was a long time before I saw another apparition full on. I'd see figures of a solid black man out of the corner of my eye, to turn and nothing was there. So anyone can believe what they want, but for me, I know, capital K-N-O-W, there is more out there than just this, quote, physical world. As well, there is much we weren't taught or were taught wrong, even if the ones that taught us had the best intentions. Anywho, that's all for now, folks, with the tongue sticking out emoji.
So we knew it was super serious.
Super serial, man. Super serial.
All right. This last one on the Ghost Stories site is called Going to the Cemetery. This one's by Dana64. There is no Dana, only Zool.
Nice Ghostbusters. Oh, reference there. Throwback.
Today, February 8th, 2020, at approximately 1:45 p.m., my husband and I were heading to the cemetery to visit my youngest sister who passed away at age 38. Today made 2 years, and we were meeting my family to visit her. Weird things have happened, like my husband's toothbrush has been thrown in the shower twice. Weird, I know. But today, on our way to the radio station, on our way to the cemetery, the radio station kept changing on us as we were driving. We have a newer vehicle, so no issues with it. It has never happened before, and I'm just saying, my Kia does this, like, all the time. Like, I'll be driving along, and the radio station will change for no reason. And
or maybe your Kia Soul just doesn't like your choice of music.
maybe it doesn't. But I'm saying my car does this
you
too.
do listen to a song 100 times. I would change it too. I'd be like, I ain't listening to that song one more time. That's 750. There is not 751. Move on.
I like what I like. So, back to the story. I've been really depressed the last few weeks, knowing this terrible anniversary is coming up. I was anxious, afraid to go. It makes it too real to see her headstone. I wonder if it's her. I find dimes and pennies, see shadows. Hubby's toothbrush gets thrown in the shower. I think about her daily. I miss her so much. So much was left unsaid when she passed. I'm not sure if this is real, meaning I'm kind of freaked out, and so is my husband. I want to see her so bad. I want to talk to her. Sometimes I feel someone rubbing my side when I'm in bed, when I'm sad. I know it isn't my husband. He sleeps in a separate bedroom because of his CPAP machine. Is she visiting us? Is she visiting me? Or is it my own energy doing this? I wish I could communicate with her. I wish I knew who this was. If she's trying to get my attention, if it's her or another family member. I know this stuff seems small, but this is new to us. My husband's brother recently passed as well. His was due to to his wife's neglects. What? It could have been prevented. We're trying to get guardianship of him, but lost.
That's sad.
That is very sad. He was 57. My sister passed from cancer. Yeah. My sister passed from cancer. She was 38 with a 5-year-old and an 8-month-old. Thanks so much for letting me tell my small story. What do you think? Oh, I think that, take it as you want it. I mean, if it's something that's soothing to you, then, great. I mean,
that's why people go to mediums, is they want some sort of closure.
Right, exactly. And, the next time you're laying in bed sad and someone's rubbing your side, then just talk to it. I mean, whether it's your sister or another relative, just talk to them. I don't know. That one was a very sad story that I could kind of see where if, having that experience, it seems like it comforts her more than scares her.
Right. So, what do I think? I think if it comforts you, like you said, just let it happen and be comforted.
Right, exactly.
The final story of the evening. This is not a ghost story. The ghost stories are done. It kind of is a ghost story, but it's not a ghost story. The Curse of the Maynooth Ghost Room, posted by Charlie Heinz. What compels young priests in training to commit suicide in this room of Ireland's National Seminary?
Jeezel.
Almost every Irish person has been told some form of ghost story from their granny or granddad, the Irish Mirror wrote, in a recent roundup of the most haunted places in Ireland, or even witnessed one themselves. In Ireland, imposing castle walls and ivy-covered manors loom like grey ghosts in the warm glow of the modern world. It is a culture where folklore from the country's ancient pagan roots is interwoven with the centuries of Roman Catholic superstition to create a unique culture in which fairies may swap your wife or child for a changeling, an evil look-alike, and it is common knowledge that the devil lurks in Loftus Hall. Maybe that story you told earlier at the graveyard, maybe it was a changeling.
Oh.
Could have been a changeling.
Very true.
Ooh. And it was going to take her if she didn't get off of that, she didn't get off that lawnmower and run like Sharky Sharky was chasing her. She was about to be switched out for a changeling. Even with the hollowed walls of St. Patrick's College, Ireland's National Seminary in Maynooth, where priests, and if I'm saying that wrong, Maynooth, where priests have been trained for over 200 years, a malicious spirit seems to have taken up residence. The Ghost Room from the June 25th, 1978 edition of the Irish Independent. The story of the Ghost Room was related to me, my Pedrog Lawler, a scholar of theology and Irish history, who studied at Maynooth University. During his time there, he gleaned the ghastly details of the legend from his professors, as well as the environment where the story really came to life. In the pubs where it was retold by locals, who had a few too many Guinness pints, he did.
I'm not going to apologize.
The history department where Pedrog spent a considerable amount of time is headquartered in a building known as Rhetoric House. Today, the university and the seminary share a campus, but when Rhetoric House was built in 1834, it served as a residence for priests in training. The ghost room, officially designated Room 2, is located on the same floor as the history professor's office. It is a predominantly empty room with a small altar covering the only window. A statue of St. Joseph, the patron saint of peaceful death, occupies the altar. You can still see what appears to be bloodstains on the wooden floor, Pedrog told me. The first suicide happened in the early 1840s. The gruesome scene was discovered after the resident of Room 2 missed the day's lectures. When his friends went looking for him, they found him in the room soaking in a pool of his own blood from a self-inflicted gash across his throat. Room 2 was vacant for the rest of the year. I can't imagine why. I've been like, hey, that's a vacant room. Let me move in there. I like it's big. Let's do it. The following year, the room was assigned to a new, unwitting young man who shockingly was found dead under the exact same circumstances, throat slashed and razor hand. How are you not know? I feel like if I moved into that room, that there is no way someone was going to be like, hey, you know what happened in that room?
Right, exactly.
Priest, seminary, whatever. Someone's going to spill those beans. Sometime after, another resident of Room 2 was found lying on the ground outside Rhetoric House after he jumped from the third floor window.
Oh, gosh.
He was still alive, though barely. Before succumbing to his injuries, the student told college authorities that he had seen a demonic face in the mirror that morning. He then became compelled by a powerful urge to end his life and grabbed his razor uncontrollably, struggling against what he believed was a demonic force manipulating him to cut his own throat. He threw himself through the window to make it stop. After this incident, a priest spent a night in the room hoping to determine what was causing young men to kill themselves. According to the legend, he was so horrified by whatever he experienced that when he emerged the following morning, his hair had gone completely white. He was never able to speak about what he encountered that night. At the time, suicide was regarded as a horrifying sin, Pedrock said. The matter was covered up by the college, and the students were buried in an unconsecrated part of the college cemetery away from the other graves. Room 2 was closed and eventually converted into the oratory it is today. It is also used as the history department's workroom, so if you need to make copies or pick up your graded history exam, you'll have to contend with whatever evil may still be lurking. But don't bring any mirrors into the ghost room hoping to see the demonic presence, because according to rumor, that is strictly forbidden. When paranormal researcher Hans Holzer investigated the room with psychic Sybil Leek for ghost true encounters from the world beyond, they felt fear and the desire to run, as well as a strong presence around the statue of St. Joseph. Sybil also received the impression of a four-legged creature.
Interesting. So they actually have a rule set up that you cannot bring a mirror into the room.
Apparently.
Ooh.
I would say that the mirror must act as a gateway for the demon.
Interesting.
I mean, there's all kinds of stories about covering mirrors when someone dies, trapping spirits in mirrors, things like that. So maybe it's a trapped spirit, trapped demonic force, something trapped in a mirror.
Wow.
That's in that room.
Great story to end on.
I think so. And I'm going to make a shout out to Hans Holzer because, he's dead now, but he investigated many things in the 1950s when it was probably considered very uncouth to do so. And he filmed most of his things. And now there is a show on the Travel Channel called The Holzer Files, where Darkness Day from Darkness Radio actually opens up some of the unsolved files. A lot of the ones that Holzer solved, he filed away, but there were some that he was never able to solve or that continued. Or he always tried to help people. So when he would go someplace, he didn't just try to investigate and that was it. He would try to investigate and then do whatever it took to help them remove whatever it was from their life. So there were several cases where he was unable to do that. And so in the Holzer Files television show, they investigate these unsolved cases. It's a really good show. First season's out there. You can stream it on the Travel Channel right now. We're not paid. Just it's a good show. And I like Darkness Day. I like Darkness Day from Darkness Radio. You can listen to his podcast. It's twice a week too. Just look up Darkness Radio. So, without further ado, it's been a great episode, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
That's all the time we have for this episode. As always, we thank you for listening to The Dragon's Nest. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dragon's Nest PC. That's Dragons with an S, Nest PC for podcast. We are on YouTube, so please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. You can listen and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms such as Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google, iTunes, and at our host site, SoundCloud. To search for us, just search The Dragon's Nest. That's the THE, Dragons with an S, Nest. If you would like to share a story with us or have ideas you'd like to hear in a future show, please send an email to thedragonsnest@outlook.com or call and leave us your story at 513-549-3049. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time
inside the Dragon's Nest.